This is the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Hey guys, Chris Jones, your host. Today I have a very special guest for you. His name is Vidal Cisneros Jr. Vidal has recently been included in the newest Chicken Soup for the Soul Think Possible, talking about his story, how gratitude got me through. He's going to discuss that today. He's also going to talk about what it is to become an author, a professional speaker, a success coach, and what he calls a purpose igniter. Vidal used his own life experiences to be authentic and transparent, and in doing so, he shares about how betrayal, divorce, depression, alcohol abuse, and incarceration, all these difficult times, has enabled him to become a dream chaser and made his purpose clear. And now he takes that purpose and he shares it with others with the hope of inspiring other people to live amazing lives. So without further ado, I bring you Vidal Cisneros Jr. Vidal, welcome to the show.
I am grateful to be here. Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity. I'm excited to share my story.
Yeah, please, let's dive right in. Take us through your story.
Years ago, I was a blue-collar construction guy that loved to being a workaholic. That was kind of my thing. It was what I identified with back then. And being of Mexican descent, 100%, it's like in my DNA, so to speak, stereotypically, right? So I adopted that. And unfortunately, it led me down a path where I began to see my marriage failing. I gave up on trying to be there as a father to an extent for sporting events and stuff like that, quality time. And I just let their mother deal with it. And that was something that was not congruent with my core beliefs. So way back when I got married in my early 20s, I had always dreamed of having a family, 2 kids, the whole nine, white picket fence, and the whole 9 yards, But what changed from that dream was that I stopped identifying with that person that was a family man, and I gave up in a sense on that. And I started believing that there's only one. It's like there's no gray. I can't do both. It's either I provide 100% or I just go full tilt with being the father in their life. So that led me down a path where I knew I had to get away from my job. So this blue-collar freeway construction job as a project site manager was draining me. It was burning me out. And that last season, I completely, on purpose, Chris, burnt myself out. And this was to leverage me out of that industry so that I would never return. It's almost like the equivalent of somebody that knows they need to lose weight. So then they overeat, they binge out on purpose because they know how disgusted they're going to be after that 2, 3, 4 days of binging out, that they're going to leverage themselves to want to change something, to change, whether it's eating habits. For me, I was depressed. I was miserable. I wasn't chasing my dreams, and I was neglecting my family. So I made a decision one day in my work truck. And leading up to that point, I told the fellas at work, I said, guys, if I'm still here after this large 5-year project, please take me out to the back and shoot me because I'm not a lifer. And these guys would joke, and we had this little inside jokes at work. No, you're a lifer. And if anybody called you a lifer, you just felt disrespected completely. So me being a person that wanted to get back to who I really was at my core, I finally made a decision sitting at work in that work truck one day. And I said, this is it. I made a promise. I made a vow to myself and my maker that I would burn this bridge. I wasn't going to go back. So leveraging myself out, burning myself out that season, I worked an average of 75 to 80 hours that whole season. And I had worked 2 weeks in a row, 90 plus hours. And I don't want anybody that knows what that looks like to ever do that again. Don't. It's not healthy. But all of that gave me this insurmountable belief, Chris, that I could do anything once I put my mind to it. But yes, there was a cost. There was a cost, and I wasn't willing to do that anymore. So stepping away from that job, that career, opened up just a new paradigm for me. And I hired a success coach. Hiring that success coach, he taught me all these basic personal development principles and self-growth hacks that I never knew of. And then I shifted into getting into some real estate investing with the success coach, and things were taking off. Things were phenomenal. But then, Chris, then it gets a little sketchy here. I had known that my wife at the time was doing some stuff behind my back, but because I was so lit up and so passionate about what I was doing, I kind of figured there's no possible way. That was her strongest quality, was her loyalty. Like, I never questioned that ever, ever, ever. You know, being married with her for 10 years, with her for 16, never would have guessed that. So then finally, I was like, man, something's really up. It's going to come out. Truth is going to come out. So one day she says, look, just don't go to work today. I got to talk to you. And leading up to that point, that month beforehand, she would cry. She'd bawl her eyes out in the bathroom and just wanted to confess, but she couldn't. So finally on that day when she told me not to go to work, call in, please. I was like, okay, I'm going to find out. So I walk in the room and she says, you're going to have to sit down. It's like, okay, trust me, I already know what I'm going to hear. She's like, yeah, I'm seeing somebody else. It's like, okay. Now remember, up to this point, transformation had happened because of my success coach. So I wasn't the workaholic a-hole, so to speak, that just oozed, manliness all day long, right? And machismo. That wasn't me anymore. It was transformation. So she was about to witness it on this day. So after confessing that she was seeing another man, she said, there's more. And that's when, my heart stopped right there. Like, okay, if there's more, I know we can deal with it. Like I told her, I said, we can deal with it. She's seen the transformation that was going on, how I had changed from not caring to, that's it. I'd get up in the morning, I'd make them breakfast, I'd write love notes to them. All that stuff that I told her beforehand, making those promises that I was going to change things for us. I had finally answered that promise to her, but that's what was eating her up. So her confession led to, there's more. And I said, no matter what, we can deal with this. She said, I'm pregnant. I said, okay. That was the shocker of all shockers. But I was still hanging out some hope. And I said, you know what? It's got to be mine, right? She said, no. But she said it in such a way that she undeniably knew it wasn't. So in that moment, Chris, I ran outside. This was like a cold March day here in Wisconsin, where I'm from. And breathing in that cold air and just looking up to the sky, I was like, holy cow, everything from this point is about to change, like dramatically. And I had no idea how bad it was going to get. But I felt as if something humongous was just moving everything that I had built and just about to destroy it. And I couldn't do anything about it. That was the sad part, Chris. I could not do anything about it in that moment. So I ran back in the house. I said, you know what? Even if it's not mine, I'll raise it as my own. Okay. In that moment, she saw all the work that I had put in and all of the effort I was doing with changing myself internally. She saw it in that moment. But she couldn't hold up her end of the bargain. It wasn't meant to be. Those following weeks, Chris, I would spiral down into, man, not sleeping, not eating. It was just eating me out. It was just eating me alive, this stress. And knowing that everything we had was gone. It was never going to go back to what it was. It's just, I had to face that. And her heart wasn't with me. That was the second thing I had to face, was that her heart was not with me. And watching every day, every week go by, knowing that her stomach and pregnancy was getting further and further. Back then, 6 some years ago, I remember it was insane what we focus on. But everywhere I focused on people being pregnant, like that's all I could see. And I'm like, oh my God, is God just trying to terrorize me? It's like, what the heck? But I still believed in this power of gratitude that I had learned. It wasn't a new concept, but I learned how to leverage it from the inside out, because gratitude changes you from the inside out. So what I did every morning is I would pray, even during that time, for my wife at the time, the estranged man she was with, and the unborn child. I prayed blessings onto them. And I did it because I knew I had to do something radical to shift myself internally, because I knew things were about to get really bad if I didn't. But they did anyway. And the reason they did was I began to drink at night, even though I was well versed with the word back then. I was very strong in my Christian walk back then and doing all this personal development stuff. At night, I couldn't take the pain. It was just something about not being able to experience everything you're supposed to experience with your family at night. It was hard. And I ended up leaving my house. That was the hardest thing for me to do, is to walk away from that. But it was for my sanity, because I was going insane there. As I did that, there was one big fear that was stopping me. And this fear was someone else taking my place. So for anybody out there that's listening that maybe is going through, something hopefully not as bad as what I went through, but something like along the lines of separation, breakup, and you're a parent and you fear somebody taking your place, I want you to know that nobody can take your place. Nobody, as a mother, as a father, nobody can take your place if you don't give them permission to. So grabbing onto this mantra that I'm going to show up, Chris, for my daughters, no matter what, every day, call them, be there for them, pick them up, whatever it is I got to do. I'm going to be there for them as best as I can, and nobody's going to take my place as a father. I really stepped into that belief in order to overcome the limiting belief. So as I did that, I moved out of the house, and I finally got a sense of clearing my head a little bit. But at night, it was just painful. So as I drank further down, I spiraled into alcoholic abuse at night. I hit a culmination point, a night that I would never imagine I'd experience. And prior to that, I'd get behind the wheel, inebriated, and every time it was worse. So the 3-4 months after that, I became an alcoholic, sitting at bar stools, having bartenders ask me, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Like, I'd be sitting there at the stool and bawling my eyes out. And when they notice, everything's cool. Just give me another shot. That's the man. That's the man sometimes that we portray, this facade. And I was suppressing all that pain. My outlet back then was going to church, singing, worshiping, praising twice a week, and then numbing it with alcohol. But there was still something missing. I needed help, Chris. And on that night, I got behind the wheel, and I ended up getting into a high-speed chase, which was plastered all over the news. But it was nothing like what the news portrayed. It was me getting behind the wheel, driving erratically, speeds of over 130 miles an hour on the freeway, nothing I'm proud of. And the ironic part is I used to work with sheriff deputies on the freeways. I knew them by first name. We were friends, co-workers. But on this night, it was something else. I lost a deputy twice downtown here in Milwaukee. I ended up crashing, hitting another drunk driver. Thank God that he only had a broken collarbone. But that night, Chris, I had to stop running. I had to stop running because I was out of control. And me having, friends that were in law enforcement only made it worse. I was way out of control. So that night, getting caught and then having to explain to a deputy sheriff why this happened to me or what was going on as he got done filling out the paperwork and everything. And he was very upset because I lost him twice. So he was extremely pissed at me, rightfully so. So after that paperwork was filled, he asked me, he said, you know what? A person with a clean record in his 30s doesn't do something like this. He said, what's wrong? And I told him my story. And I also told him all the people that I knew that were sheriff deputies and that he knew by first name. And he said, dude, why didn't you tell me this before I wrote the paperwork up? I said, deputy, that's the problem. I'm out of control. So in that light bulb moment, Chris, things began to shift. And I was scared out of my mind because the next 4 days they sent me into county. And this was a holding bullpen. In this bullpen, they had everybody that was waiting to see the federal judge. So these federal judges were going to look at people with heinous crimes that were doing life sentences. And knowing I was in there, and it was a scary thing, going through withdrawals, alcoholic withdrawals, and it was intense. It got really intense really fast, and I knew I had to do something very big to shift that. So I started fasting and praying feverishly while I was going through those withdrawals. And every person I would give my tray to, it would have to be somebody that was reading something inspirational or reading the Bible. And they caught notice of what I was doing, and they started inviting me into like their prayer groups, their little gatherings up in the library there. And I started learning about these people that from the outside were criminals. People saw them as whatever murders, whatever crimes they were there, but I didn't see that when I began to talk and learn about their stories. We prejudge people just based on all these superficial things that have nothing to do with who they really are in the moment. So as I learned more about these men that had transformed and that were on the right path, they taught me so much. I didn't see the criminal anymore. I saw the person that just had some bad cards dealt to them, the person that was a victim of their environment. And throughout this whole time, I would practice gratitude for all of this. But while I was praying and fasting, Chris, it was as if internally something shifted on such a high level in that place for those 4 days that like shocked my system, and I came out of there just vibrating on a whole new level. And while I was there initially for those 4 days, waiting to face months later a conviction of 6 months for driving recklessly in my first DUI, injuring somebody, rightfully so. That's what I deserved with those 6 months. But in those initial 4 days, I found a book in that library, and the book was called Chicken Soup for the Soul, the original printed back in 1994, 95. Man, that book, it it had so many stories, and I'm not going to lie, in the beginning, they did sound cheesy. Some of them were cheesy. But after I read them over and over and over again, because that's all I had to read in there were the Bible and a couple self-help books, things shifted. And I started believing that if the worst stuff can happen to me, then I know for certain the best stuff can happen if I just believe and line up with it. So things really shifted radically for me there. And now, to date, I've had my story featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul Think Possible. I've met a phenomenal person that I call my girlfriend, my significant other, that I would have never ever thought back then that I deserved somebody like that. And I'm speaking to audiences, sharing my story of purpose and how I found my purpose through all of these traumatic circumstances. And I've never ever experienced so much joy, especially for everything that's happened with my story being featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm super grateful how life has shifted and how I learned that no matter what, we got to let go of the past. In order to let the good in, we have to let go of the past. That was the one thing that I remember was holding me back, was letting go of the past gifts, the past blessings, in order to let the new ones in. If you can picture somebody frustrated, enraged, with their fists closed, they can't receive anything, nothing good, if they don't open their hands up and let those gifts fall into those hands. That's what I learned. As hard as it is to let go, but good things happen. So that's just some of the story. I'm just paraphrasing everything. There's so many details in there, but I am writing a book about this and how to shift your life from the inside out.
What a powerful, powerful story. It's very touching. I can tell you that. It's very touching. It's very real. And anybody can sense just how genuine you are. So, I appreciate you and applaud you for putting your story out there, because it's one of those where it's very beneficial. There are people who have been touched by every piece that you've touched. You know what I mean? People who've been through the betrayal, the divorce, the depression, the alcohol abuse, the incarceration. People have been everywhere you've been, and it makes you so much more relatable. So as you stood in jail holding that copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul, did the thought even cross your mind that someday you would be a part of that story?
And not initially, but I did have this thought while I was reading those stories, Chris. Some of those stories, even though they were old, they were 20-some years old, I thought, holy cow, by the time I'm done going through whatever the heck I'm going through, my story should be in there. That's what I was thinking, because I was like, wow, if their stories are in there and they've had success, because let's just say this one thing that I know it's kind of hard for some people to sometimes wrap their head around, is the fact that we identify success with profits and monetary value and money. And my story has nothing to do with money. It has not one thing to do with money. I ended up getting psychological help, professional help. That's what really shifted me after I stepped out of that situation with being in jail for those 4 days. The judge appointed me help, therapy, which I could not have, paid for before that because of what I was going through. I lost my job because of my DUI at a CDL. And we have to get to a point where we're so broken, Chris, that we have no other way to go but up. There's like nothing there. There's a new identity being carved out, being shaped. And we move forward creating this identity, wanting for ourselves what we've always dreamed. And that's exactly this is what I've always dreamed, Chris, is of being an inspirational speaker, writing a book. I remember when I was in high school, writing just this list of, like a bucket list or a dream board, and just saying, I want to get on stage. I want to write a book and all this stuff. I want to be in Barnes and Nobles. I had a book signing a couple weeks ago at Barnes and Nobles. Who would have thought that was possible for somebody in my situation that has never written a book before? It's
it's amazing. So how did that come about? Can you tell us how the whole Chicken Soup for the Soul piece came to be?
absolutely. I had hired one writing coach, and then I ended up hiring another one. The second writing coach was a professional editor and professional ghostwriter. So her editing skills came in super handy in my situation. And it was all my story that I wrote out. But again, I'm not a writer per se, so I definitely needed their help. And we only had 48 hours until the deadline was up for that specific book. And I was thinking to myself, how the heck am I going to cram my story into 1,200 words? Because that's what they needed for that submission. So thankfully, I reached out to this person that was coaching me, and she's like, yes, I will edit it. And she stayed up like a trooper, probably, I don't know how, we had 48 hours. So from the minute I gave it to her, probably like 24. And this is what she does. She did it very, very prompt, got it back to me. I submitted it, and that was phenomenal. It's one of those things, Chris, where I knew if this time it wasn't going to work, I was going to try again until it finally, because I knew somewhere in there, I knew it was going to fit in one of these books. It had to have.
Wow. Now, that's something you've mentioned twice. You've mentioned coaches. You had a success coach in the beginning, and then you've had a writing coach, when you were working on Chicken Soup for the Soul. How valuable has it been for you to go outside of yourself for the help that you need to be successful?
It is an invaluable resource that I highly recommend anybody out there right now. It's if you want to achieve anything in life that you're struggling at, and if there's coaches available, hire them, but make sure that they have the results that you're after. I highly recommend that. And the more skin in the game you have, the more powerful it is going to be for your change, your transformation. That's exactly what happened to me. My first success coach, Chris, I had to pay a lot of money for that, and it was well worth it, a million times over. I'm going to tell you guys right now. So I highly recommend that, and I agree.
Now, are you still working with a writing coach on some of your other projects?
Yes, occasionally I work with editors for large publications here and there when I'm submitting stuff. But I usually pick up writing coaches when I'm writing a book, or I really need their help for editing a book also that I'm currently going to be writing. So in probably the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be hiring one, as a matter of fact.
Now, walk us through the steps that it takes to be a coach. Like, it's something that you're pursuing right now. You've developed kind of a platform around your story. You want to be able to take your story and inspire people with it. How does someone who has maybe something similar break into coaching?
That is a great question, Chris. For myself, I can tell you, if you want to start a coaching program, or if you want to start coaching anybody, you have to hire a coach first. Once you set up a plan with this coach on you getting clients and setting up and scheduling appointments to get testimonials, or even just some free coaching, I know there's a lot of different strategies to get started. But the thing that I would recommend for somebody out there is to definitely start writing on larger platforms, start blogging. And if you can write a book, hire somebody, it would give you a strong position where you're credible. There's no doubt you're going to be looked at as credible once somebody reads your book and sees that the content you wrote about, you own 100%. That's you, that's your expertise, and you're going to get speaking engagements, which is what happened to me right now, currently is happening. I've gotten a couple of speaking engagements from me being on the Morning Blend, and being featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul and doing all this stuff with them, it's given me a phenomenal jumpstart, and I'm super grateful for it. So I highly recommend writing for large publications, writing a book if you can, and hiring a coach to support you, give you accountability, and give you the confidence and the belief that you can do this.
Now, tell us a little about some of the writing that you're doing with both Huffington Post and the Good Men Project.
Yeah, with the Huffington Post, it's more in the HuffPost divorce section. So currently right now, that's kind of what some of my focus is with HuffPost. That's what they've reached out. I've had some of the editors there reach out from the divorce section and want little snippets and pieces from me. And for GMP, I tend to write more on my experiences or more on secondhand stories of things that I've experienced as well. But a lot of it, I try to stay true to my kind of like what I write on my blog mostly, which is on entrepreneurship, personal development, life hacks, success hacks, things that I've learned through my journey.
As a writer, when you're developing yourself, developing your platform, being able to articulate that into words, how did you get started with blogging? Was it something that came natural to you? Was it something that someone encouraged you to do? And then once you began to do it, how did your comfort level change, and how regular are you now?
Great questions. So to answer the first part of that, what did I begin to do, like write about first on my blog, right?
Right, yeah. Like what did you first begin to, start to write about?
Years ago, I've been blogging for a long time. It hasn't been consistent throughout the years until recently. But in the past, I would blog about success and failure, and I would kind of grow content out of quotes that I loved. And I began to see the power of quotes with SEO, and how SEO gives you a huge juice. And I kind of leveraged that. And I also saw, because I've had success. Some videos go viral on a YouTube video, and they were stemmed around a quote that helped those videos go viral. So it goes back to writing in quotes and creating content, opening up that space for me. And then later on, I started being more transparent in my blogging and my writing. So currently, I'm trying to be more consistent. I'm trying to set up more of a schedule. So I'm trying to be consistent with all my writing weekly, which is a challenge for me because, again, I'm not a writer per se, but I think we have this misnomer that writing has to come from some professional space within you. And I don't believe that, not for one second. I don't believe that. It's about you being transparent, you being you. People are going to resonate with your content once you're real, and that's what I've learned. I've learned that from my writing coaches. Would you agree, Chris?
I would totally agree. Ironically, it's funny that you say that. Episode 17, I was talking to John David Mann, he's a New York Times bestselling writer, author, and he talks about that very thing. He just says, hey, it's about being passionate. He said people are going to gravitate to the person who's the most passionate. They may not be the best writer per se, but if they have the expertise and the energy, people are going to gravitate towards that person because that's what they see and that's what they want.
Exactly. Completely agree with you.
As you're building your platform, how much of the platform is actual engagement? Outside of just kind of your writing, your television appearances, your book, how much of it is actually physical engagement? Like how are you connecting with people outside of the social sphere to develop genuine relationships and generate interest in what you're doing?
That is one thing that is like the outer level. And I think that's where you close the gap, is when we go out to different events. So for myself per se, it's been going to Toastmaster club groups, joining them, being a guest speaker there, also connecting with other big, large speaking events like TEDx. Like I've reached out to some TEDx speakers. I've connected with them also, and things are taking off with locally for me, but it's because I've put myself out there and just sat in their space. So for me, proximity has power. So currently right now, I would highly recommend anybody out there, if you want to be a speaker, writer, author, there are meetups in your area, wherever you are. There's also a writers meetup that has some phenomenal authors that I'm connected with, and I have to dedicate more time. But you'd be surprised how many New York Times bestselling authors are in your town. They just don't promote themselves. But once you connect with the influencers and the connectors that know those authors, you'd be surprised how close you are to somebody that could coach you and teach you that's a New York Times bestselling author. I mean, how cool is that, right?
That's very cool. No, you're absolutely right. It's funny because you know the world as you get older, you know, my dad used to say it all the time. As you get older, the world gets smaller, and I find it to be true. It's very true. But then also now social media has made the world even smaller. It's almost in the palm of your hand, you know, where you can actually jump online and you can actually reach out to and talk to some of these influencers on a regular basis, and they're so willing to share knowledge. That's the one thing I've found is that true influencers, are very unselfish. They want to give it away. They want to see other people succeed. I mean, do you agree with that?
1000%, Chris. I have a local mastermind group that I created here. And a lot of people think you should keep the secret sauce to yourself. And I disagree with that completely. Don't keep it to yourself. When you see somebody that's a go-getter, those people are the ones you want to give it to. And if an influencer is giving you their secret sauce, they see you lit up and they see you're taking action and they're giving it to you because they know you're going to do something with it. That's a gift, a tremendous gift. And when I see that, Chris, I do it every single time. So my network here locally is growing tremendously now. You know, people really connect with you when you're your true passionate self, like you said. So I'm excited, but definitely it's get out there, shake hands, you know, connect with it's so easy now to reach out to other people in your area. So please do that if you're looking to level up to the next sphere. It may be a lot of authors and writers are introverts. I'm going to tell you guys right now, you'd be surprised. I'm an introvert. By nature, I'm an introvert. I had to put in a lot of work to be able to be this extrovert that everybody sees nowadays on TV. A lot of work, I'm going to tell you. Oh man, this is good stuff, brother. Appreciate being on your show, man.
Oh no, absolutely. I love having you. It's a great conversation just about, you said, just the writing process, just getting out there. Because it's very important as writers, as people who have built platforms on speaking like yourself. It's just important to be in community. Something I wanted to ask you about just to see what your thoughts were. You know, a lot of times when we're developing our platform and we're building our ideas and our identity around these ideas, we tend to think in grand scale. How important do you think it is to capture your local market first?
I wouldn't put it on a priority in the beginning. I would say wait for some momentum. You know, that's the beauty of the internet, is you can gain momentum by getting coaching clients, international coaching clients from all over the world. Once you have those testimonials and those clients backing you up and you feel confident, then maybe you can reach out. But I will confess, Chris, my first coaching client, I reached out and they were local here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. And I saw them struggling with a big heartbreak. Like I could just read in between the lines through every single one of their Facebook posts. So I reached out and messaged them and I said, hey, look, I like what you're doing right now. I just had a little conversation with him because I resonated with him because he was a humongous introvert. Okay. He has like this speech impediment also. And I told him, I said, I know what you're going through. I've been there. How about we have some coffee? He was so on board with it. When I first sat down with him and he started opening up to me, I had this light bulb moment go off, Chris. And I said to myself, holy shiz, I'm sitting across from myself. I was like, wow, how powerful is that? And then I began to coach him naturally. It was something that I went through. So it was so natural for me to talk to him. I gave him all of the secret sauce that I learned from my mentors. He took action. Next thing you know, instead of him being in a bad breakup, feeling overweight, bent out of shape, months later, he's lit up, he's on fire, and he's got all the girls chasing him, including the one that broke his heart. And that was enough for me to say, you know what? I got to keep going. He was my first testimonial video I ever had years ago. And it's just that one person that believes that you can help them. Give it to them. Give them the secret sauce. Don't hold back.
Now, quick question about coaching rates. How do you set rates? I've looked at, a lot of models from just a lot of the larger guys online, the Hyatts, the Goins, and just looking at some of the guys who are even who are in my industry, who do what I do. How do you set your rates so that one, you're competitive, but two, you're not pricing yourself out of the market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. The way I go about that is depending on your niche. So a good friend of mine locally, he's blowing up. He's bananas online how much money he's making. And the reason why he can make that is because he's niched down. He's in an industry that is giving tremendous profits, okay, as in physical checks, okay, for his clients. Now that's different. He can charge just about anything he wants, okay, because the proof is in those puddings with the check, with those checks. So for us that are giving more of a result-based just kind of program that they can transform their life, even though it's intangible, I still believe it's worth a lot depending on your positioning, how many testimonials you have, your authority positioning. I know it's hard for somebody to say, hey, I want $1,000, but yet you have zero testimonials or you have nobody right now that's saying you're credible. So once you start writing for these large publications and people are sharing your articles and they see that your stuff actually is impacting, I think then you can start to charge a little bit more. And for myself right now, I've helped a couple people, Chris, get into a Chicken Soup for the Soul book because now it's easy for me to do that. And now that I'm seeing their success, I'm like, holy cow, I could just coach for that, right? But it's all a process, man. It is a testing game, as I'm sure you know, Chris. It takes a while, but it sounds like you're really niched down right now, and I like where you're at with your business writing, podcast right now. That's good.
Hey, thanks a lot. No, I definitely find that to be true. All the people that I've spoken to and talked to, just even beyond the podcast, but even on Twitter and things, they all talk about that. Just niche in. Because there's an old saying, I don't know if you heard it before, where it goes, the riches are in the niches, and it's true. You got to really kind of identify the one thing you do really, really well, better than anybody else, as opposed to being very broad.
Right. And I know I've had some conversations too with people on this. And it's like, you know what? If you want to be known as the divorce coach or the divorce after divorce guy, then that's great. Go for it. See, that's kind of something that I want to share this with you guys, is that I don't want to do that because I feel now that I want to go a little bit away from just divorce. I want to go towards complete transformation, like through crisis, because I know I can help somebody else going through all the stuff that I went through in my story. Like, I don't just want to focus on after divorce, because then there might be a situation that they say, well, I just want divorce coaching from you. And it's like, man, I don't just want to give you that. I want to help you change your life. You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm going, but this is going to evolve. It's never going to stay the same. It's an evolution process here, and I'm all for it.
I'm with you. All right, we're going to come in for a landing. I want you to close us out really with, a quote that motivates you. And then after that, just some parting advice for anyone who's listening who, like I said, who may want to follow in your footsteps. Just what can they do? What action can they take right now?
Awesome. Right now, a quote that motivates me, Chris, is, and this is kind of like an older quote, but it's big for me. If you want to succeed, you got to want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe. Now, this is from E.T., the hip hop preacher. I love that quote. And sometimes we have to be obsessed. So I love that. So if anybody out there wants to reach out, actually, Chris, I want to gift this to your audience out there. So if anybody wants to read my story, How Gratitude Got Me Through, that's featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul, I don't want somebody out there that doesn't have the money to buy the book to not be able to read the story. So if you go to my website over at vidalcisnerosjr.com and you sign up, I'll give you the ebook in PDF form. And then also, if you don't like to read, I'll give you the audio book as well. So these are all gifts from me to you guys, and anybody out there that wants to take action with that, I commend you. And sometimes you just got to go after it. As much as crisis shows up, trauma shows up, it's going to happen. Challenges are going to show up. You just got to keep going. That's like one of the mantras that I kept saying through this whole thing, Chris, is keep going. Just keep going.
Lastly, how can our audience get a hold of you?
Yep, I'm all over, man. So if you guys go to @visionary_Vidal, you can find me on Twitter. Also, if you go to Vidal Cisneros Jr. on Facebook, you can connect with me. So anywhere, just punch in my name, Google search me. Let's connect.
All right, and I'll make sure that all these are in the show notes so that people can click and find you. Awesome. Well, Vidal, thank you so much for being on the show, just sharing your story, for just adding so much value today.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Thank you.
All right, take care. Wow, what an inspiring episode. If you weren't able to take notes, I've got you covered. Visit my website at www.chrisjonesinc.com/podcast to get today's show notes, as well as access other episodes you may have missed. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast on iTunes. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.